Hey y'all, this is Caitlin and we are back with another crime time. Dun dun dun. This is part 2 of a double murder case. If you missed part 1, you can find the link below. So let's go ahead and get into part 2. That is the double murder of Mattie Cathrine Restine and Patty Sue Pritz. I do want to take a brief moment to say I will go into some of the details of what happened to the girls, and maybe it's a little bit graphic. But if you are very interested like I was, stick around because we are going to get into this case. I want to first take a moment to talk about the location of where the girls were found, because it is said that Patty might have been the person that was meant to be murdered, and Mattie just happened to be there whenever Patty was kidnapped, if that is what happened. Or if she went willingly, we don't know. When they found the girls, Mattie had been in more of a pristine condition than Patty had been. There was a lot of aggression and violence taken out on Patty's body, which makes people believe that she was targeted. Both the girls had, in my opinion, been sexually assaulted. It just happens that Mattie's clothes were still on her and she was placed more neatly at the crime scene. While Patty, her clothes were folded, oddly. Her clothes were folded, but her undergarments were thrown around, and it is reported that she had a little diary or journal that she kept, and it was placed on her clothing stack. So odd. I have no clue how that happened. Some people think that maybe her clothes are folded because the man forced her to undress and threw her, and she was trying to save time by folding them and placing them there, and maybe the guy got angry and so forth. At the crime scene, Mattie was reported to have no sexual assault, which doesn't make sense because there was DNA found on her clothes. We don't know what type of DNA, but I'm assuming that it would be semen or some type of body fluid, which would say that she was assaulted in some way. And there were signs to her body that one could assume was caused by sexual assault. While Patty, I think it's very clear that she was sexually assaulted. Her clothes were thrown off. She was found naked. And she had a lot of damage to her body, such as some cuts and physical abuse. One of these cuts was actually around her nipple, and the documents report that they were cuts. A lot of people assume they might have been bites, but we can't really say one way or another. I also want to go into the suspects. From this point, I want to go into the suspect list. After the interrogation of Ben and Willie, there was further evidence that Willie had actually been charged or looked into for sexual assault against minors before. They started to dig into Willie, and that soon led them to his son, David. Now, David, I believe, was in his early 20s. He had a wife at the time and was Willie's son. Here's my thoughts on why David is the person who committed these crimes. He was known to be very abusive to his wife, and Patty had actually been rumored to have dated a lot of older guys, sometimes married. Now, Patty's 14, and a lot of the reports kind of, in a way, shed negative light on Patty, like she might have been a little rebel, and that's what it is to me. She was a little rebellious in the way she acted. She was a little bit more mature for her age in her dating and the life that she lived, which no one can judge her for that. She had a very hard life. Her mother was an alcoholic. Her stepdad was not a kind man, and she really just was not dealt the best hand in life. But that doesn't say anything negative on her. So the rumors are that Patty and David might have been seeing each other at some point, and David convinced her to go with him in the car. But the curious part is The girls were found 36 hours later, and they don't believe that they were killed at the scene of the crime because the crime wasn't a very messy, crazy scene at all. It did have some blood from the headshot wounds, but nothing really there was convincing that this is where the crime took place. So to me, it's interesting as to how they ended up in this area. And this area, I believe, is somewhere where locals know and would easily be able to drop a body off if they know the area well. And I don't think David's dad set the best example because he had been charged with talking to minors before and assaulting minors. But that case was dismissed, and guess who his alibi was at the time? Mr. and Mrs. Hughes, who were the same alibi for the night that the two girls went missing. And now I don't know how exactly they made the jump to David. I think it has to do with the fact that they just started looking into him. And some interesting facts. The night of the murder at around 12:30 a.m., so now it's the 12th, his wife reports that him and his father came to their home and David was distressed. He quickly changed his clothes, packed his things, and he went to another town in the middle of the night. Okay. And in the middle of the night, his dad was saying, oh, he has a job offer. He needs to go do this. It's very unlikely that was the truth. Now, David told his wife, like, don't worry about it. It's fine. And this was mid-August. He came back in mid-September to Carlsbad, New Mexico, and he had sold his car in Texas. They don't know, his wife wasn't sure why, but I think the wife is very suspicious of David. Now they are divorced, they have kids, and David was actually later arrested for assaulting another minor, and he went to jail, but the jail time I think was under a year. The third suspect in this case is Earl Nichols. He was a man who was visiting Carlsbad at the time from a local town in Texas. The two states are very close together. And Nichols was 70, around the age of 70 years old at the time of the crime. And when police asked him about where he was the night, he had reported that he was parked at the beach area and had seen the girls. I think Nichols could have been a suspect except for the age and the witness of seeing the girls with a younger man. The reason he's still a suspect is because his children at the time had reported that evening he was there visiting his daughter. That evening that he left town quickly in the middle of the night, and it was not planned. He was supposed to be there for at least a week longer. And in recent, well, I would say in 2019, his daughter at the time was 90 years old. No. Maybe she was 90 years old. I can't remember the exact facts of the age, but quite older. And she had reason to believe, and his granddaughter also was trying to help get his DNA tested because they thought, they were for sure he has something to do with this crime. Now, we don't know the exact details of why, but they did want police to come take their DNA to try to match it to that of Nichols. Okay, I remember now, he was 73 years old, yes. So I find it very hard to believe that a 73-year-old man was with these two girls somehow after they had gotten in the car with a man in his late 20s, and I think it would be very easy to see the difference for the witnesses of an older man and a man in his late 20s. But most of the reason he's a suspect is because of the circumstances he left in, and he was reported to be an odd character with some other charges against him for sexual assault of minors, or a little bit just being a little creep, you know? Like, he was a creepy man. And he was a suspect because he also drove a similar type of car to what was reported to see the girls go in. But it's hard to say that all of these men drove cars that were similar to what the girls were last seen getting into. And I'm just really unsure to report that because I couldn't find clear details on what the car was. if it was a Chevy, if it was from 1956, 1955, different headlights. It was a little bit confusing. So Earl Nichols was the third suspect, and some other suspects they are saying might have been people who were known to be in the police force, but their name just didn't come up enough for me to research that. The biggest one that I also believe would have been guilty is David Blair. Just because of the situation and the fact that his dad found the bodies. To me, I feel like this is what happened. There are rumors that maybe Patty was pregnant with David's child, but there's no for sure proof of that. The autopsy has no report of that. Not because they said yes or no, we didn't find that. It's just the details aren't there for me to find. I believe David had some type of relationship with Patty in the past, or maybe he just saw the girls and was interested. And since Patty did like older men, she wanted to go ahead and go with him. Maybe she thought they would have fun. She was a little bit wild child. And Mattie was just victim of circumstance. She was with her friend and agreed. Maybe just wanting to, have fun. After this, I don't know. It's such a mystery because 36 hours is a long time. I don't know where the crime could have taken place. I believe it would have been somewhere that David knew. And he couldn't leave the bodies there because it would be obvious it was him. But I don't know where that place could have been. And then I think that he drove out and dumped the girls' bodies. And again, he had most of his aggression towards Patty, maybe because they had some type of history. But I do believe that there is a reason Willie found the bodies. I think maybe he knew they were there. And that's why he had been drive down that road, because it'd been a day since their bodies were out there. He thought maybe someone would have found them. Maybe he felt a little bit guilty, or I'm not too sure why he would have led them out there. But I think that's kind of the connection of how they were found and why they think David was a suspect. If you guys have any other reason to believe someone else might have been a suspect, or you've heard anything different in the case, let me know below in the comments section, because I'm very curious. Personally, I think maybe David is too suspicious. The circumstances are too exact to the situation of him leaving in the middle of the night, selling the car. People reported maybe he could have committed the crime in the vehicle, but there would have been a lot of blood, and also to shoot people twice in a car, there would be more damage, and also physical ear damage because it's a closed container of metal, and shooting a gun in that proximity would be extremely loud. So that's where I'm at with the suspects. I wanted to talk a little bit of what could be corruption of this case. Why haven't they charged anybody with the murder of these two young girls? Mind blown. Evidence, they have evidence. And I don't know why the DNA has not been tested or shown to prove who did it. Honestly, it's a weird thing that the town kind of didn't want anything to do with this case anymore. So the evidence that they had was they found size 7.5 shoe prints and tire tracks at the crime scene. This can't be from Willie and Ben, the two people who found the bodies, because they didn't get out of the car and they didn't drive up next to the bodies. So they have those two things and DNA evidence. They have suspects, and the DNA of these men was never taken. Nothing was ever tested, to my knowledge and to what I read online, as well as the fact that Nichols' family is offering their DNA. Even though it is sometime later, they're saying, please take our DNA. They're contacting the police office. Nobody ever took the DNA to test it. Now, in 2003, a man by the name Jim Estrada said, we're going to reopen this case. We're going to find justice for Mattie and Patty. I have strong belief that we are close to a break in this case. So this was big news in the area. This was a double homicide of two young girls. All these years later, they had a break. The DNA was going to be tested, and Mattie's body was excavated so that they could get more DNA. It was in the news, October, case going to be solved. And then all of a sudden, what? Nothing happened. Nothing. No more information. Now, Jim Strata was a part of the Eddy County Sheriff's Office. I believe he was a good man with good intentions. I think he's passed away at this time. Oddly enough, though, he retired shortly after this announcement. I couldn't find reason for his retirement. But yeah, the case went cold after he retired. It's just odd. Another strange connection, which I had some trouble actually finding the full details on this. A man by the name of Dan McGrew. So Dan McGrew had been in the police department. He had known about this case, and it's to believe, I don't know much about him. I'm so sorry, you guys. The corruption part is hard to dig details in because everything is covered up. Like, they won't release any information. But 4 years after this case, he committed suicide, but it is believed that he was murdered because he happened to be on the phone with someone at the time, and a lot of people think it was a hit because he had information on the case. And there are some rumors that other officers know it was a cover-up and they just couldn't do anything. As well as some police officers reporting that they had tried to look into the case, like these cold cases, and they wanted to reopen this case. But a lot of the detectives in the Eddy County and Carlsbad Police Department were saying, don't look into it. You do not want to dig into that mess. Just don't do it. Why? Why wouldn't you want to solve the case? As well as Mattie's sister. She has reported many times online that they really try to scare her away from digging into the case any more than she should. They made her take down some of the things she posts online. And some people have also called in to find information, and they just kind of get like, oh yeah, okay, sure. But nothing else happens in the case. Do I know what happened? No way. But do I have a theory? Yes. Do I think that they could find justice for Mattie and Patty? I do. The time is running out. This is a 60-year-old case. A lot of the suspects are past, they're dead, and people who can help with the situation have also passed away. But there is DNA evidence that they can get from family members to help solve this case. It's just the fact that there's no media coverage. No one, it's just being forgotten, and Anne, she's really tried hard to keep the case open and to keep it in the media attention, reach out to the FBI, everything. But unless the FBI is contacted by the Eddy County Sheriff's Office or the Carlsbad Police Department, they can't look into the case any further. It is reported at the time that the Blair family had some, connections in the police department. And specifically David's mother, I believe her name is Artel, don't know, I think that's her name. And her previous name was, or she had a relationship with the Tituses, which were connected to the police department. Very confusing, but there are connections there because people have made them. Just the details to find the exact relationships are a little bit difficult. I don't know where they had power in this community, though, that it could be covered up. That's what I'm very curious about. Like, who had enough power to cover this case up? I will say that growing up over the years, I've heard in the history of Carlsbad with the higher law enforcement, mayors, governors, etc., that there have been a lot of cover-ups and just crappy jobs done. Again, I want to say that, remember, these people have children and family members that are still local in the areas. They have nothing to do with this. They should not be harassed in any way. This is something for the police department to handle. I will list the information down below of the Carlsbad Police Department. If you see this and you want to call the number, just report to them that you would like them to look into the case of Mattie and Patty. I will give you the full names if you need. The case is from 1961, August 11th, 1961. If you want to call this number and let them know you're interested, maybe if they get enough calls, somebody will try to open it again. I don't know. It's just very sad that this case hasn't been solved, and it's pretty famous in my area, but not known at all as well. Mattie's mother died at the age of 55 from a heart attack. Her older brother committed suicide because the case just really destroyed the family. And Patty's family, her mother, like I said, was reported to be not a great woman. Her stepfather, not a great man. She did have some half-sisters, and I believe half-brothers as well. But her dad was kept out of her life completely. And once this happened, it was the first time he actually got to be involved in her life, was her funeral. And her half-sisters really tried to find justice for Patty as well, but they were turned away over and over again. And they actually didn't have much resources. So they just weren't in the same town. It was really difficult for them. Okay, guys, that's it on this case. I really hope that some people contact the Carlsbad Police Department. I will myself, and just let them know that they would like some answers on this case if there's ever going to be a reopening to solve the crime. I want to give a big shout out to Anne Restine's self, who really has dedicated like years of her life, decades of her life, to try and bring justice for Mattie and Patty. When the system failed them, when the community failed them, she tried extremely hard to give life to this case and get justice. I'm sorry if the information I shared was not enough or too much, but this case had so many little details, and it's all self-reported through the sister Anne Restine self. So it was hard to get documents on what actually happened. Even the newspaper clippings I had was not reporting correctly what had happened in the case. That's all, guys. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay positive.